There was a tweet that was like, housing is so expensive, you'll never be able to afford it by just saving a little money on DoorDash if you live in California or something. The only way out is to make a lot more money, so why bother being frugal?
I think that belief that you just articulated is a belief that's held among many young people where there's just a lot of nihilism, and they're correct, right? If you order an extra 30 deliveries a year or even 100 deliveries a year, like that's simply not going to be enough to put a down payment on a house outside San Francisco. Young people are working really long hours. It's exhausting, especially like low wage workers. A lot of times they just don't have the capacity to cook. People don't have money for these big purchases, and they often don't feel like they'll ever reach these big life milestones.
Did you get all of that?
We are live once again with friend of the show, Taylor Lorenz. So Taylor, welcome back to MTS.
Thanks
Welcome.
for having me. Hi. Sorry, it's kind of dark here. I'm in Europe. It's about to be sundown.
Wow.
Beautiful.
What's in your...
What place? Yeah.
I'm in Berlin. I was here giving a talk about online anonymity, why we should protect it.
Exciting. Yeah, they don't seem to like it that much over there.
They don't like it in America either, unfortunately. It's scary. So.
All right. So we were just doing some discourse in our morning timeline review about like saving money. There was like a tweet that was like, the younger and poorer the generation, the more they eat out and DoorDash. This is part of the problem. Or it's like the interwar generation older than boomers spend like 70% of their food spending is groceries. But for Gen Z, only 32% of Gen Z food spending is groceries. And the other 2/3 is restaurant and delivery, like DoorDash. And the main discourse in the comments section was like, this is because housing is so expensive, like you'll never be able to afford it by just saving a little money on DoorDash if you live in California or something. The only way out is to make a lot more money, so why bother being frugal? Do you have any takes on the matter?
I think that belief that you just articulated is a belief that's held among many young people where there's just a lot of nihilism and exhaustion, and they're correct, right? Like if you order an extra 30 deliveries a year or even 100 deliveries a year, like that's simply not going to be enough to put a down payment on a house outside San Francisco. So I think it's just frustration. I also think young people are working really long hours. It's exhausting, especially low wage workers. A lot of times they don't have the capacity to cook. They're working double shifts. It's exhausting. Like you're doing takeout or delivery every day.
Yeah.
That was kind of the argument we were making of just like, oh, if you can't buy a house, then why bother? I remember seeing something about how like Gen Z is more willing to pay for experiences for this same reason. Because they're just like, yeah,
$300 for a
whatever.
BTS concert.
Exactly.
They just did that the last 3-4 days in Stanford.
Yeah, I think that it's like, again, people don't have money for these big purchases, and they often don't feel like they'll ever reach these big life milestones. This is also why you saw the discourse around these crazy prom send-off things, basically, where they're doing these really elaborate prom send-offs, and a lot of people are like, well, I probably won't ever afford a wedding. I probably won't ever afford XYZ. Might as well, do this crazy prom send-off. Because I think it's very hard for a lot of young people to picture their future very far and ahead right now, just the way our economy is.
Do you think that social media has played any part in radicalizing people? Like if you're seeing so much, on the one hand, you're seeing a certain subset of influencers living their best life, creating some sort of standard for what material wealth looks like. And you see it, and it's a quite sizable amount of people that were able to make this life for themselves. But then obviously that's just what's boosted by the algorithm. And then what's invisible is everyone else who is obviously not able to afford any of that.
I don't think that a lot of influencers are actually very aspirational in that way, especially since 2020, the sort of categories of influencers that have risen most, it's actually people that are more relatable. I feel like the peak kind of aspirational influencer thing was 2015 to 2017. When it was a real Instagram lifestyle. But as things moved to video and people couldn't mimic those lifestyles as much, it's sort of fallen out of favor. Now it's cooler to be more relatable. I think it's just the economy. Like, I think if these young people had enough money to put a down payment on a house, they would be doing that. They want to reach these milestones. But have you seen this video? I don't know. It was like this parody video that was kind of viral of like this guy pretending, and it was like every 12-year-old on Instagram right now. And it's like, all the 12-year-old like hustlers on Instagram. Mm-hmm. Like, I need to retire my parents by the time I'm 18. Like, I need to be, starting an e-commerce business by the time I'm 15, like already 13. Like, I think there's so much economic pressure, and we've encouraged children.
13 is washed.
What'd you say?
13 is washed.
Yeah, but like these kids feel like they're behind already. You know what I mean? And I just think that like they've internalized this this idea that they have to like work insanely hard and they have to get started young in order to buy out all these rental houses that they can then flip or whatever. I just think it's like a lottery economy. I mean, Kyla Scanlon wrote a good piece on that, but I think she's right.
Well, the big news of today in the media world is that James Murdoch bought Vox. He bought like the Vox podcasts, and he bought New York Magazine and Vox.com. So what's going on with that? What takes do we have in this world?
Well, this was rumored. So I think it was Oliver Darcy and Status had reported on this, and certainly some other media reporters had sort of speculated that this deal was going to go through. So it's finally closed, and it went through exactly as how a lot of people suspected, which is basically that they cleaved Vox in half and took New York Magazine because it's a prestige brand and took the Vox Media podcast network because it's profitable. I think I really do worry about like The Verge and Eater because they're spinning out and they're going to be an independent company run by, I think, Vox's president. But yeah, I don't know. I think it doesn't bode well necessarily. Like this deal doesn't necessarily bode well for them. Vox Media Podcast Network is profitable. And this is probably the best exit that any digital media company is going to get in 2026. Somebody tweeted this chart of what all the digital media companies sold for. And it was like Vice, Mike.com, which sold for $5 million after being valued in the hundreds of millions. Like, I think that the whole bottom has crashed out. Axios sold at the perfect time. But Vox.com, for instance, is not going to be getting more traffic in 5 years than now.
Right.
Why not?
Because no one's reading articles on the internet, much less from Vox.com. No hate, but no one reads any article. Like, it's just, I think that we're moving into this like AI-driven agentic world. And I think also like New York Magazine is providing this like prestige-driven, like character-driven journalism written by a lot of famous people. Like it distinguishes itself, and I think a lot of these prestige publications have been able to kind of make this business case and reach this prestige audience. I think Vox.com was operating primarily, I mean, it's known for explainers, things that AI can do better than anything, you know? So I don't know that, I mean, all these publishers, the big discussion this week has been like, what are you going to do at Google Zero, you know? And are we going to reach Google Zero? And that's going to be a huge moment for publishers.
What's Google Zero?
When there's zero traffic from Google.
Oh, I see.
Yeah, which is, you know, they already have no
bleak.
traffic from social. They're not going to get traffic from Google. So how are these websites going to sustain themselves?
Yeah, it seems like a lot of these independent media outlets are really struggling right now. While the New York Times, for example, is doing just fine. It's always done just fine. New York Times is,
They have
I think,
completely different business model though, right?
yeah. How so?
Well, like the business model of digital media, especially like all these companies that are in the same category as Vox, although Vox was smart to build out their podcast network. Again, that's like now the most valuable part of their company. They leaned into that early. Most of these other digital media companies didn't do that. And so their websites relying on traffic to monetize or subscriptions. The traffic went out the window with the social, you know, as Facebook cut off link traffic, Twitter cut off link traffic, although I know Nikita's tried to change Twitter to like get people to click some links, but it's not coming back the way it was in like 2016. People are just clicking articles less. They're consuming more video content, which is more costly to produce year over year. A lot of them tried to switch to subscription, but now they're competing against products like the New York Times, which offer cooking, games, you know, all of these other services, and they've really diversified kind of their offerings. Nobody really wants to pay for just news, much less like news explainers, and it's really tough for digital media, you know, websites out there. And I think more people are getting their news and information from podcasters, from influencers. They're not going to articles at all to get
Substack. Yeah. What does the future of journalism and reading look like? Like, is it just going to be like, do people crave more editorialized content now? Is this what the rise of Substack is? And even the rise of independent journalists like yourself?
Yeah, because people think that opinion writing is news journalism. Like they can't distinguish like a reported article from like an opinion piece. It's a huge problem in like media literacy, because if you look at like all the top like news content creators on Substack, it's like they're mostly writing opinion pieces. And this is a huge thing with influencers more broadly, right? Like there's just this few and smaller amount of people that are doing the actual journalism, and then like all these people pontificating on it, and the people pontificating on it are just kind of like saying a political slant like one way or the other, and then like racking up all the money. None of the money is going to the actual journalism production. So it's a huge problem for having an educated public, but it's been great business for independent digital media entrepreneurs that want to lean into that sort of opinionated takes and stuff like that.
Right, I see.
Which I just think it's hard, you know, it's just there's not a lot of support, financial support for investigative reporting, especially not investigative reporting that challenges people's preconceived worldview.
Right. Yeah, investigative reporting is interesting. Is that something that you ever considered going into? Or why is that what?
I do investigations all the time.
Or
Yeah, I do them. I wouldn't want to be like a full time, like there are these people, for instance, Michael Keller at the New York Times, these amazing journalists that like they basically work on like one or two stories a year. And
Right,
they're just like investigating, right? Yeah, those people, I mean, those jobs, there's like what, 10 of them in the industry at this point. Like it's so
Like the guy
fewer
we
and
had
fewer
on
and
from
fewer.
Slate, who did the
Yeah,
article on the
but
Florida
that's
oranges.
Oh yeah, he's an amazing features writer. Yeah. Yeah. But those features writing jobs are as rare as the investigative journalism jobs because again, they want you to churn out content constantly. Like you're often expected to write, you just have to perform at a level that wasn't the case if you worked in media in the 1990s and you could write for Vanity Fair and make a salary and write like 4 pieces a year. Like that's just not going to cut it. So I think it's sad also because we need investigative journalism. We desperately need investigative journalism to expose corporate wrongdoing and educate the public, you know, tell people, hey, you're wrong about this. Like, here's the truth of the situation, you know, just keep people informed.
yeah. So another big story that we had today was Jeff Bezos and his like various takes on the podcast that he appeared on. So do you have any
podcast?
thoughts? Oh, sorry, not podcast.
Yeah.
Too brain rotted. So Jeff Bezos said that the taxes for lower salary workers are too high. So he said basically like we shouldn't be asking the nurses in Queens to be sending money to Washington. What are your thoughts on?
Because he said that bottom 50% of people by income pay like 3% of federal taxes. So why bother taxing them at all?
Yeah, okay. So let's not tax them, but he should be taxed more then, I guess. I don't know.
Like his take on this was that like it would not really fix the problem if he was taxed because he doesn't trust that to get sort of like properly distributed to that hypothetical nurse in Queens.
So he doesn't trust that if taxing him as a billionaire, he doesn't trust that that money would actually go to help a working class person. Is that what you're saying? I mean, yeah, this is what you hear constantly. I live in Los Angeles. I live in California. I don't think my taxes are going to helping very many things. It's a disaster and LA is inept. And there's another wildfire happening, I think, somewhere not too far from where I live today that my friends were talking about. So, you know, okay, he doesn't think that, but that's not an argument necessarily not to tax people. I think it's an argument to have more accountability on our government and have more oversight over how those funds are being distributed and how they're being used. I think every American knows our tax dollars are constantly wasted on the dumbest stuff. I would argue foreign wars being a big part of that. Look at the military spending that we're wasting, just shipping it off to Iran or Israel or whatever. So I think there's certainly areas we can cut back from a federal level, on a state level, and reallocate those funds to better. But if Jeff Bezos is going to wait until the government becomes efficient, until he starts paying taxes, that's just very silly. I think it has to be a more collaborative process than that.
Yeah, totally. What other clips do we have from him?
We had one where he talked about philanthropy. He was like, I think that I will do more good for the world in building Amazon and Blue Origin, his private companies, than he would through philanthropy.
That's interesting. I feel like it's so interesting to hear. I've been like reading so much from the EA people. I'm sure you guys are familiar with the effective altruist sort of like belief systems. I feel like, yeah, I mean, I think it's like an interesting idea. I think a lot of these ideas and theories and practice, like how can you do the best good in the world, is like a great question to ask. It's noble for anybody to endeavor to do good in the world. So I don't want to shame anybody for feeling that, even if it's Jeff Bezos. I think Amazon has improved the world in a lot of ways, but it's also kind of caused a lot of harm to local businesses and isn't always the best sort of employer and stuff like that. So I don't know net good or bad, kind of how you would weigh Amazon as a company in terms of how good it is. I think he probably has a way too rosy view of how good Amazon is. But Amazon Web Services is a great product. Like, we rely on it for a lot of amazing services. I don't know. I'm not going to say that it's a useless company.
Yeah, we
Maybe
also read an article that was about like there should be this like philanthropic version of Silicon Valley. So you would have like nonprofit VCs and then nonprofit capital allocators, which would be
Nonprofit
like nonprofit
startups with specific scope and like targets and performance-based funding and all kinds of stuff like that. I think that like huge amount of philanthropic capital is about to hit the ecosystem because of AI money.
Also, in terms of nonprofit startups, like most startups fail, right? So most startup capital, like you are kind of giving it away. Like it is kind of like, not like, I don't want to call it a philanthropic business because obviously they're hoping that like a couple things hit it big. But I think there was a lot of like maybe NFT charity investment happening, a couple years ago. I do think with the AI money, it's interesting to kind of see where that's going to be allocated and what causes people care about. I think that what's been so interesting to me is I'm a vegan and nobody fucks with the vegans ever. Like it's always the most marginalized kind of thing. But for whatever reason, the EA, there's a lot of overlap with EA people in veganism. And I feel like it's now being talked about and accepted in certain circles that it wasn't previously, maybe because these people have clout and they're willing to sort of talk about it. And I think that's really cool to see. But I don't know. It depends on kind of the EA people also have a lot of weird beliefs in terms of how they allocate their money. So I don't know. It'll be interesting to kind of see where that goes. I'm skeptical of a lot of the AI safety funding that they're doling out,
Yeah. There's another Bezos clip where Andrew Ross Sorkin was asking him, why is the Post laying people off? Should the Post be a public trust rather than a privately owned, profitable enterprise? Yeah. Maybe. So would it actually be good for more news orgs to be nonprofits?
Sure, that could be a business model. The Guardian has a trust, and that's provided them a level of financial stability. ProPublica is an amazing nonprofit newsroom. I think that is a great model. I don't know if it's the only model for journalism that we want, but I think it's a great model. Clearly, the way that Bezos is running the Post now is not working for him. The traffic does not seem to be there. The paper's flopping. But there's a lot of amazing people that are still there, but it's sort of this depreciating asset. I don't know if restoring it to a nonprofit or making it a nonprofit at this point would save it. Maybe. I think a lot of the Post failure is just down to Bezos's mismanagement.
It seems like a lot, maybe acquisition by big companies of news outlets maybe is destined to follow this path.
I think a lot of billionaires just don't necessarily know how to run a media company. I think running a media company is incredibly hard. It's one of the most hard, difficult businesses to turn a profit. I think you can just look at all of the failed media products over the years, all the failed media startups. It's a really, really tough industry. And so, especially news media of all things, it's not like food media, real estate media, news media where you're doing investigative journalism that's antagonistic to people in power. That's going to be really hard. But I also think that he made a lot of stupid decisions and fired a lot of or not fired, I guess they got laid off or bought out some of the best journalists. And that's a bummer. But we'll see if they can adapt. They've been very, very sort of anti-digital, almost refusing to adopt digital, laying off their entire podcast team, now trying to relaunch an opinion podcast after getting rid of all their podcast people, not investing in internet, not allowing journalists to kind of build their brands. It seems really like a misguided project. But I have friends that are still at the Post that are amazing journalists, so I hope that things turn around for them.
Do you have any insight into what people are reading? In terms of articles by these traditional media outlets?
Well, I think they deep dive, long read type things. I think, again, it's the prestige thing of sitting down, reading a New Yorker story, reading a New York Magazine feature. Those really break through. Some of them break through to the point that they get optioned even as a film or a movie or Netflix. I think for commodity news, people just kind of get a lot of information from all over and they're not necessarily maybe going to CNN or New York Times to check the news as much as they are getting a push alert or seeing it aggregated on Google News somewhere. People love personalities. It's a lot of the opinion columns. It's a lot of the what did my favorite columnist write today or whatever. Yeah, I think about this a lot just because I've thought about my own newsletter and what to do with it. And I read Casey Newton, who's a great tech journalist. He wrote recently about how he's rethinking his sort of business and his newsletter in the age of AI. And one thing that I imagine is that most people will interact primarily with their email newsletter inbox through agents. I personally wish I had an agent that would just read my emails for me and pull stuff out. And so I do wonder what that will do to email newsletters, because I don't think their email newsletters are sort of a terrible format that I don't think a lot of people enjoy reading in their newsletter format. And I think we're just going to be relying on more and more sort of agents to help us navigate the information ecosystem. So I think newsletters are a little doomed, and I do think people will just continue to want more video and live streaming and interactive type content.
Interesting. Do you think because I feel there's a saturation point with podcasts already.
Well, now we just have so many, but I promise you that doesn't mean that there's not going to be another hit somebody making a podcast today could still have a massive hit podcast in a couple years.
Right.
Because even though it's like completely saturated, like things come and go. You know what I mean? Things peak and like look at Dwark Cash. Like when did he start that podcast? Like a couple years ago. Like I think we've like been at saturation point for podcasts for a while, but people can still get hits.
Yeah, I mean, I just think that it's not as competitive as a newspaper. Maybe people will have one newspaper subscription, but they'll listen to multiple podcasts.
I think podcasts are also something that like you are consuming as entertainment, and like a lot of the news products today are just not inherently entertaining. You feel like you have to like sit down and like force yourself to kind of like read what's going on, or like make yourself consume information instead of just like enjoying yourself while you consume the information.
I think that the best podcasts or the best creators are trying to hit multiple birds with one stone. Like they're trying to be informative and also fun and also like I think that that's probably what's going to prevail, especially as like Gen Z sort of like grows into the information economy.
I hope that it's more like I hope that we have better, more interactive formats and that it's engaging. I think also people are going to be engaging with more synthetic media, like podcasts that they've made themselves with AI around a specific topic or something. Like some of those are getting really good. Somebody was giving me one. Oh, it was like this Epstein podcast that kind of blew up that's entirely AI generated, but it's like accurate information theoretically. My friend was telling me about it, and like it's really popular and people have been listening to it. And yeah, it's just this AI generated podcast that someone made, sort of aggregating the information there.
Yeah.
But I think that's going to be a lot. I think more and more people are going to either make their own content like that or consume AI generated content from other people.
Well, we're about to hit time. Taylor, this has been so great as usual. Thanks so much for coming on MTS again.
Thanks for joining.
Thanks for having me.